Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Robert with Skeptic Philosophy, and welcome to the stream. Today's subject we are going to be talking about, let's see if we can get it up on the screen here, is do people see God? I'm sorry, I got a background sound here I'm going to have to fix. There we go. Do people feel God? And what does God feel like? And before we get into the depths of this subject, I'm going to read a short passage from a book, and then we'll get further into the subject. I'll get more into what the book is about and who writes it later. If we should inquire for the essence of government, for example, one man might tell us it was authority, another submission, another police, another an army, another assembly, another a system of laws. Yet all the while, it would be true that no concrete government can exist without all these things, one of which is more important at one moment and others at another. The man who knows government most completely is he who troubles himself least about a definition which shall give their essence, enjoying an intimate acquaintance with all their particulars in turn. He would naturally regard an abstract conception in which these were unified as a thing more misleading than enlightening. And why may not religion be a conception equally complex? Consider also the religious sentiment, which we see referred to in so many books as if it were a single sort of mental entity. In the psychologies and in the philosophies of religion, we find the authors attempting to specify just what entity it is. One man allies it to the feeling of dependence. One makes it a derivative from fear. Others connect it with the sexual life. Others still identify it with the feeling of the infinite, and so on. Such different ways of conceiving it ought of themselves to arouse doubt as to whether it possibly can be one specific thing. And the moment we are willing to treat the term religious sentiment as a collective name for the many sentiments which religious objects may arouse in alteration, we see that it probably contains nothing whatever of a psychologically specific nature. That comes from a very infamous book on the subject that we are getting into, that some would argue is something of the authority on the subject. It comes from the book, The Varieties of Religious Experiences, written by William James in 1902. William James, I encourage everyone to, first of all, read the book. I have not read it all myself. I'm about halfway through the book. It is in lectures that I believe is a 10-part group of lectures. This book has inspired other, even modern philosophers. I think as late as 2018, we have a book that is similarly titled from a philosopher that deals with consciousness. And I'm trying, it's Mike something, I can't remember his name, but I believe he has a similarly named book called The Varieties of Religious, or The Varieties of Spiritual Experiences, or something of that nature. And it is very much an homage and goes back to James's work on this. James kind of divided the subject a little bit into different types of experiences. And from both the psychology side of getting people to talk about what these experiences, what feeling God feels like, what is the sensation that they're referring to, and getting specifics, and then trying to take all of these feelings and kind of categorize them into a set. And I'm going to give you a loose idea of what that set is that he categorized. So in 5 different kind of definitional groups here. Mystical experiences. These are often serene and transcendental, where individuals feel a sense of unity with the divine or the universe. And then we have ecstatic experiences. These involve intense emotions, sometimes accompanied by physical sensations like adrenaline rush, and often lead to profound sense of divine presence, that people in these ecstatic experiences feel more of a presence. And three, conversion experiences. These are moments of profound transformation where individuals feel a new, deep connection to the divine, often marked by uh, catharsis or a cathartic experience. And by the way, even the word cathartic is such an interesting history. If y'all ever want to look into the history of catharsis or cathartic as a word, this comes out of the Greek, and it literally means to purify. So when people have, and other religions have described it way before Christianity, this cathartic like sensation or movement, it was like there was a purification, a cleansing of, that they felt renewed and cleansed. So then we have those experiences. Then the fourth, we have quiet or serene experiences. These are categorized by a calm, peaceful presence where individuals feel connected to the divine in a gentle, contemplative way. And then finally, five, and again, there's a lots going in here. We're trying to just pack everything, every supposed experience, every confessed experience of the divine. And there's a whole reason that James, by the way, uses the term divine rather than God, because it's very difficult to define what everybody's feeling, but the sensations have a lot of similarities, and there seems to be five main categories. But anyway, the fifth one is pragmatic or practical experiences. These involves a sense of the divine in everyday life and action, often in moments of moral clarity or ethical decisions. It might be something such as a moral impulse, or if we're making a decision that we're going to stand up in a situation. And I can't remember the exact explanation of this that James gives. I'm sorry, I've read this years ago, but it was something like rising to a moral position and saying, no, that I will. And here, there's a great one, and actually even in the Bible, that who will stand in the gap, where David talks about in the Old Testament that there's this internal pride that rises and says that he cannot allow. It's a righteous indignation of sorts. But these kind of things would feel that kind of gap. Zeal, there you go. That's the term that is regularly used from the KJV, that they were filled with zeal. And this is one thing that would go into this category of the fifth category. In a few moments, we're going to have open panel here, and we'll allow guests to come in. So if we do have anybody that is interested in coming in and conversating, we'll put that up. We're going to have, let me put it on the ticker tape here. That we'll have this in about 20 minutes after we start. If people do want to come in and have that conversation, we'll be happy to. But the reason that I'm talking about this subject, and the reason that this subject is of great importance, is because the sensation or the feeling that people say that they feel God is one of not only the number one reasons that people say that they know that God is real, that they know that whatever their God is that they believe in, that it is real. It is directly related to the sensation, to the feeling that they say that they feel God. And not only is it directly relating, but James uncovered that that sensation is directly related to terminologies such as personal, that people believe that they have a personal relationship, that personal relationship is directly couched inside of people saying that they feel something, that they genuinely feel an emotion. So the reason this is of great importance is we have so much historical literature throughout time, whether we're in the writings from the poems of Dionysus or the plays, or we're looking at writings from Saturn religion, or even the Nordic religions. We see these regular confessions that they feel the spirit of Odin, or that they feel the spirit of Dionysus. And in some of these, like the ecstatic religions, they even say that they feel the spirit of Dionysus come into them and move them. And in some of them, we see there's a lot of parallels, such as in the book of Acts and the book of Ephesians. We have, like in Ephesians 5, we have an experience where they say that they are filled with the spirit, and that they are drunk in the spirit. And there's a lot of similarities to this and Dionysus, which was the god of fertility and wine, and that people that felt that they were feeling Dionysus, that they had a drunken like behavior to them. So that we get this inside of the ecstatic categories, such as in the Pentecostal movements, and we these days, and again, we see it in the book of Acts, and we see it in Ephesians 5. We get this kind of core, that this is the same similar sensation. That having been said, I'm going to read another small section from one of the works of the Dionysus that talk about this, and I'll give a link to this. By the way, if y'all don't know about the Internet Archive is just a treasure trove of books. If you want all of the free books that you ever want to read, Gutenberg has a lot of great books as well. I think it's gutenberg.org, but the Internet Archive has just been my go-to. And I'll put a link in the description, and I'll put it up on the channel about where some of this is coming from. But this is coming from a book about Dionysus, and there's a citation in here that says, it is a wild bull, this Pentheus in the Bacchic possession sees fitfully the mystic shape of the god beneath the human disguise. The second sight, the exaltation of spirit, and the feeling of supernatural strength comes to Pentheus as they came to the two old men. But to them, the change came peacefully and for good. To Pentheus, it comes by force, stormedly, and for evil, because his will is against the god. And in this case, and I can already tell you, this was from Greek, and this is 500 years before anyone ever thought of Jesus. So this is 500 years before the Christian religion started. And when it says against the God, it says ton theon in the Greek, in the same way that John says ton theon in John 1. The God, but it's not referring to ton theon or the God as Yahweh. It rather is referring to ton theon as the main god of the pantheon, which would be the father of Dionysus, which would be Zeus. So when it says the God, this is again, you can read the story. I will put this link in the description, and I will put it on the sidebar here. We're going to put it in the chat, and we'll wind up throwing it up here. This is for the book, and I am going to bring down this banter, this ticker tape here. But this is where this comes from, is from the book. That you can get this in the English version of this. But there is something of a disagreement between Dionysus, which is the son of Zeus, and Zeus, and there's something of a rebellious period inside of this this play that is recounting the tale. So this is Dionysus' spirit. By the way, Bacchic possession is a very interesting term. I encourage anyone to look up this Bacchic possession. It's Bacchic. And what a Bacchic is, it is a reference to Bacchu, which is a Roman name for Dionysus. And Bacchic was specifically being associated with being drunk. So when he refers to it as a Bacchic possession, that gave him this internal strength. Many may read this as that he was just drunk off his ass, is what was going on. And they call it a Bacchic possession that gave him a strength like a bull. But again, this is what we get out of Ephesians 5, and out of Acts, where people were claiming, this is Acts 2, chapter 2, verse 13 and 15, where others accused them of being drunk. But the Bible goes on to say, but they were drunk in spirit is what they were. So there's lots of association with these things, but they were associating this in Acts with feeling ecstatic experiences and feeling the presence of God. So over and over, it seems every religious experience that people say they feel God, in whatever one of these 5 categories, it is always the case that some other religion has some documentation that predates that religion that they feel a similar experience to this. And when you press religions on this, when you press people on these sensations, how do you ask them an account for, well, how do you explain this religion feeling their God? How do you explain that they felt something? Most of them will hand wave it away under, well, it was the devil, rather than accepting that what this truly is that people have maximums of emotions and they have feelings that they feel, whether that feeling is cathartic or whether that feeling is a sensation of love, or there is this strange thing that happens in I'm trying to think of the name of it, where people strangulate themselves for sexual reasons. I can't think of the name of it to save my life, but it causes hypoxia is what it causes. And then it causes what we call a rebound effect. And what's happening is there's an extreme amount of pressure, and then there is an alleviation of the pressure. And that rebound effect causes a vividness. Like we get the same thing. If people want to experience sensations greater, they go into these sensory deprivation tanks. And then when they come out of these sensory deprivation tanks, many of them say that the light has never been so blue. The fervency of color has never been so grand, and color and taste and these things, that they're all greater because there has been a contrast. There has been a reduction of, and then there has been a rebound effect, and this is going on inside of this. Again, someone will probably could put it in comments over here, I'm sure. But what this is going on in sexual behavior, autoerotic asphyxiation. Thank you, Fatmix, or however you say that name. I will open the channel up here in a few more minutes. But what's happening here is when people do stresses about sin, they say, I'm sinful. I have a bad nature about me. Maybe it's about masturbation. Maybe it's about some trivial thing that does not in any way, shape, or form affect society. Maybe they're feeling this deep guilt at these altar call kind of things, in a way that they're being felt guilty and like they have all this sin and all this evil on them. And then when they reach a sensation of acceptance, that they feel that God has forgiven them in the same way that we do have in the autoerotic asphyxiation or in coming out of the sensory deprivation tank, we have this type of rebound effect that is cathartic. It is that I feel clean. Again, we see these terminologies used from the Greek cultures, that they feel pure, and that this sensation that there's no comparison. But what we'll get these no true Scotsman arguments that constantly happen that says, yeah, but they didn't feel God. They didn't feel God the way that I feel God. I actually do feel God. That theirs was either the devil, they'll write it off to, or just some maximum of sensation. But the truth is that people can either feel this sense of love, this sense of acceptance, this alleviation of their sinful nature and this kind of guilt, and they can feel this cathartic moment, or they can feel a vast array of sensations, and they've been feeling it for millions of years. You can go into a cave and you can have a genuine, sincere, dare I say, spiritual moment that you feel something. And what all this is getting in touch with the maximum of an emotion. It is getting in touch with something that is already inside of you, and you feel it. And maybe there are two conflicting emotions. I've heard it said, and I think it was even said on one of the X-Men's, that it lies somewhere between pain and serenity. That's where this power comes from, I think was the notion there. And I've heard this term before in other literature, that place in between pain and serenity, that we hurt and we accept at the same time. You get this kind of vocabulary in some of the Eastern philosophical cultures, whether it's Taoism or whether you get it in Buddhism, that we hurt yet accept simultaneously. And when people feel these apexes, what's going on is any God that they particularly believe in at the time, they associate that sensation with that God. So if they are in a ritual practice and they're praying to Dionysus, which we see in one of the plays, and then they feel the spirit of Dionysus come into them, that is just the God that they believed when they were feeling this sensation. And this was an apex of sensation that you cannot convince them was not Dionysus. I dare you even try. It's a waste of time. They felt this. This was God to them. And we have the same thing in modern religions. We have Christians that will say that Muslims today don't feel God in the same way, and Muslims that will say the same. They will return the favor. But the fact of the matter is, what these people are feeling is something that is internal inside of themselves, and we can feel things like love at different levels, or all the way up to what we have now romanticized as agape, that it is the highest sense of love. And we can feel these sensations at the height, at the pinnacle of what that sensation can be. And if we want to tie that in, stitch that in to that ideal which we say is God, then we say we have felt God. And every culture has done it forever, that they have felt God. That having been said, I think we've reached the 20-minute mark. We are going to open the channels here. I'm going to put a link on the description, and we're going to see if anybody does want to come in and talk on the subject, or if they have themselves had any experiences that they once associated with God, and perhaps they still do, or perhaps they have rectified that maybe that sensation wasn't God. Maybe it was just me. And I think the big thing, and by the way, anyone is invited to come in and chat on the subject if you'd like. I'd like to talk to some theists on this, and like to talk to some atheists on this about that sensation and how they would describe what they initially thought was God, what they felt. How did they square the terminology with saying that they had a personal relationship with God, and what was that sensation? I think you will regularly find that some of these sensations follow specific religious groups, and they follow patterns, such as, if we are to see the sensations that we would generally refer to as ecstatic experiences, are those that are very energy charged. We would generally associate these feelings with Pentecostal movements and dancing before the Lord with all their might, as they sometimes will use Old Testament scripture about David dancing before the Lord in these kind of high adrenaline sensations. But anybody who has come to or made the position that they have a personal relationship with God has felt some type of sensation, it seems. And maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that when you talk to people like this, they have felt something that they will always go back to and say that thing which I felt, that was God. And the big part of anyone coming away from a religion is having to rectify what it was that they felt. And is what they felt, is that inside of their mind? And this is where the moments of doubt come in. And we get this in some of even the letters of Mother Teresa, by the way, which where Mother Teresa talks about her period where she couldn't feel God, and that she felt as if the heavens were shut up like brass. That she just couldn't feel God's presence. And when we start coming away from religion, what we're doing is these feelings that we have had, we start doubting whether this was God. Was this God, or was this going on in my own mind? And I think everybody that comes to that, I'll put a few comments on the screen up here as they come in. But I invite anybody to come in and talk on this subject. I never had the feeling. Part of the reason I know was, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. And I think you'll find that a lot of people, though, have had these feelings, and especially those that were in more fundamentalist religions. But what you'll get is this Orthodox and Catholics will describe this, and I'm going to bring the 5 sets up. I wish I could actually post it on here. I wish I should have set it up in advance. But going back to the 5 different groupings that we have here, the mystical experiences, these are often transcendental, where individuals feel a sense of unity. And sometimes you get this, especially with the Muslims, because a lot of them, they'll all pray and chant in unity. And we even have there's this building that they dance around, and they like all move in motion, and there is a grand sense of unity and brotherness with this, and this is the experience that they associate with the divine. And then we get into ecstatic experiences. In modern day, Pentecostal groups are more known for this, that they'll feel the hair stand up on the back of their neck. And they say that this feeling, that thing, that is that which is God. And then we get into these conversion experiences where they have the cathartic experiences. I think the vast majority of religions do incorporate, they have something about a cathartic experience, that they feel a sense of purity. Many people use the term that they felt the blood of Christ wash over them and that they felt cleansed. Again, this is some of that rebound effect that is going on, that they felt a tremendous amount of guilt and then that guilt was alleviated. It was almost like lifting an elephant off of one's chest, and that they feel this alleviation in these cathartic experiences. And then 4, we have this quiet or sensory or serene experience. These are characteristics by a calm, peaceful presence. And we get these kind of things that are more so inside of Catholic and Orthodox religions, that we get descriptions of this or combinations of the quiet, serene experience along with the conversion experiences and the cathartic release where they don't feel guilt anymore. They feel a sense of alleviation. But these are modern time religions. We see all of these manifested in older religions. We see all of this. And I know anyone in here, whether you have had some of these experiences or you have not had these experiences, these are the walls in which you run into when you're engaging in apologetics, that what it really comes down to, their real grand reason that they believe these things is because they felt something. It's the foundation. It is the rock. It is the bedrock of the conversation. You can have all of the conversations that you want about philosophy, about the PSR, about the cause and effect, and the meaning, and all. You can have all of these conversations you want, and where they'll really, really root back to is that, but I felt God. I felt God. And they will always fall back to the sensory experience as the reason, because even if they can get somewhere with the PSR arguments or the nature of existence arguments, that thing which is irreducible, the thing that cannot be, even if they could get something out of that and say, therefore there must be some mind, it still does not get them to the right religion. It just gets them to, okay, there must be a mind that made it. Even if it was true, and there, again, there's just so many problems with this. But even if they get that, well, how does that make Christianity right? Or how does that make Islam right? Or how do we tie this back together? How does that make Jesus true? You know, and the foundation in this is they felt it. They felt it. And this is indistinguishable. This is indistinguishable from other religions. And the argument that we will regularly hear, and again, the channel is open. I do want to, I guess I need to go back and pin that up. There we go. If someone wants to come in and talk on this subject. But what they regularly will fall back on is that many people felt this in such a way that it was of such significance that they were willing to die for it. And we get these stories, and we very recently had this, and I know Asho was actually in a part of a conversation with me and some other gentlemen that defer back to this. And this is a two-pronged argument that they'll use, because they will either use that the ideal that people were willing to die for it, for proof that the sensation or the feeling is true, that they felt something in a way that they were willing to die for it, or they will use this for saying that therefore the people must have been there and actually seen Jesus resurrected or seen these miracles. Otherwise, they would never have been willing to die for it. So we either get the martyrdom narrative, specifically in Christianity. We get some in Muslims, but not as much. But we get the martyrdom narrative I'm gonna put that on the screen. That's something I do want to talk about shortly. We get the martyrdom narrative, though, that says all these people were willing to die for it. And this is just completely, this is not backed by history. We don't have any firsthand accounts. We don't have anything of anyone dying for their religion until, and it's a very light one. We have Tertullian first mentions that that Peter was bound to the cross. And we got Tertullian writing in I want to say 190, 196 is the earliest that we get this. The suggestion that Peter likely died in 64 and that he likely died for Christianity. It's the first time we get it mentioned, and we never get any kind of mentioning of, that he was given an ultimatum to relinquish or say that Christianity wasn't true. We never, that's just not present in the text. We don't get that until about 230 years later. And then we get it even more pronounced in the writings of Eusebius, which is 300 years later, that we get this more pronounced scenario where apostles were, they were asked to deny Christ, but that they could not deny Christ because they just firmly believed it so. So not only is that documentation so disconnected from reality, but I wanted to point out, and I'm actually going to put a link up here. I think I'm actually going to pull it open here. Bear with me for a moment. I wanted to show something that we have from another book. I'll have to open it in another window. Give me one moment. This is about a similar event from a different religion. Similar to those, and dare I say, more credible. All right, let's see if we can get this opened. Oh, limited preview. I got to reborrow. All right, I'm going to try to put this on the screen here. Bear with me. This is from a book you can see here at the bottom here. It is from Heimskringall. We're going to page 211 on this specific. I was already very close to it. I should have left it alone. I'm going to zoom in on this. And this is from the Nordic tradition. I think this original book, again, obviously it wasn't written in English, but I think it's dated to about 210. And by all means, I encourage anyone to look into the scholarship on this. But if I'm not mistaken, 210 to 220 is when we think it was written. And this is specifically, we're in the Saga of Olaf. And where's 211? Oh, I don't know why I'm loading so slow today. There we go. Then we don't really need the word spirit in here, but in 211, starting somewhere around here. But they departed with Yvden and continued on the way till they arrived at Tantians, won't try to pronounce that, and found the king of Netheros. Then he was brought to King Olaf. The king bade him to let himself be baptized like others, but Evelyn refused, or Evind, I think is how we would say that. Evind refused. The king, with kind words, urged him to, and I don't know if y'all can see my cursor. I think this app, you might not be able to see it, but we're on the bottom right section of this on page 211. Lost my place. Urged him to accept Christianity, both he and the bishop, giving him many reasons for so doing. Let me zoom. My eyes are too bad for this. For so doing. Anyway, but Evelyn would not budge. Then the king offered him gifts. Then we go forth. Still, Evelyn would not budge. Therapin, the king, had a basin full of live coals and brought in and had put it on Evelyn's belly, and soon his belly burst. Then Evelyn said, "Take the basin away. I want to say a few words before I die." So he was being tortured to death to accept Christ, as the narrative in the story that we have here, which is what the narrative that Christians regularly give. And that was done. Then the king asked, "Will you now believe in Christ, Yvden?" "No," he said, "I cannot accept any baptism. I am a spirit brought to life in human shape by the sorcerer Finns. My father and my mother could have no children." Then Yvden died. He had been a great sorcerer. So he was asked to convert. He refused to convert, and ultimately he died. Oh, I didn't know I didn't have that blowed up. My apologies. I will put the link, but you are more welcome to on the video. This is on the bottom right section to blow this up or look at it later. But this is what wind up happening is we have this book. I think we got this dated, the original one. Olaf was king between 995 and 1000. And we have, this is based off of, let me go back to the sources on this because I do have a few notes on it. Let's see, it's off of page 193. Just going to jump back to page 193 for a moment, because this was not a firsthand account. It was 200 years later, which is still, it's earlier than we have anyone saying that Christians were given this narrative. So even this is a better source than any Christian document that says that they were persecuted or punished and that they did not yield. This is a closer reference in time. But even more so, you'll see on this page, on page 193, this name of who he's citing. He's citing older poetry. Thorleif Rafton, however you say this damn thing, right above the 160 section. This individual is who the poetry is based off of. Or who these stories are based from, his original writings. And we have none of his original writings. However, this individual was said to be in the court of the preceding king before Olaf come into power. So the reason that's worth pointing out is because that is a firsthand account. That individual would have been present in the house of Olaf, the Christian king, which done the persecution. So if these writings are coming from this gentleman, they are a secondhand account of a firsthand account that says someone died for not relinquishing their belief in their faith, which is better than we have of any Christian. We have not, but obviously this is a little closer time. This is closer to us by, almost 1,000 years opposed to Christianity. But whenever I hear Christians, and I'm going to go ahead and close this up, but whenever I hear Christians say that, that sensation, that feeling that it was so real, or they use the other one and they say, Christians, we know that they saw Jesus. They just had to have seen Jesus, else why would they die? We don't have a good firsthand account of anyone that said they died. The story developed, the lore built and turned into that. And we have other religions that have the same narrative that are just, they're way better historically. We're closer to the original source material, and we're closer in time frame and granted, I'm still not going to write this off as a fact. Sometimes people, they will escalate their religion. They will escalate their heroes over every retelling. It's said that every hero gets brighter and brighter, and every villain gets darker and darker over every retelling. So when you put these people up on pedestals, this is what happens. So it's not strange that when we see the death of Peter, we just see that he was fast to a cross, or fast to the cross is actually what we have from Tertullian's writing in chapter 15 that talks about he's the first person to talk about the death of a martyr. In his, I forget the name of the book, but in chapter 15, he says that Peter was fast to a cross. And then we get development that it gets more and more. Oh, and he was asked to relinquish Christ and he would not. Oh, and then he was turned upside down on the cross. And we get this develop. And then by 300 years later, we have the full, developmental story. And many people associate this with, especially when we're talking about the story of Paul, because he didn't meet Jesus in any real sense. So we have an experience where he came to him instead. I cannot believe that we don't have anybody coming in comms yet. I figured somebody would at very least have a deconversion that they felt at one time that they felt God, or at very least run into someone who regularly says that's the foundation, that they cannot be convinced otherwise because they know what they felt. I can't tell you how many times I have personally ran into this. I know what I felt. And I felt God, and that's something they'll never back down on. But they're not alone on that. We've had many different religions, and in the case of this gentleman that I was just talking about from the Nordic religion, he never said he met Odin. He never said that he met the Allfather, or that he met any of these gods inside of his pantheon. So, assumably, just the experience of his life made him where he just could not renounce. He could not renounce that thing. He believed it so firmly. And that was likely inside of one or several of the different emotions that he had felt throughout the years, that he felt that he had felt Odin, or that he had felt Thor quicken him. In some of the contexts, people use Thor as quickening, giving them strength. So clearly something was there. If this individual did in fact go unto pain of death and did not relinquish it, did not recant. Again, a lot of this is embellished throughout the years. We don't know that it's the case, but when we hear this kind of argument being put forward by the religion that we deal with in modern times, which for the most part, most apologetics in the United States is going to be Christian apologetics, we get these same kind of stories as evidence and proof, these feelings, and the feeling must have been so high, it must have been so great that people were willing to die for it. People have been willing to die for these feelings from the get-go. There's no religion that you can go back through time and not find people who were willing to die for it because they believed it so true and so sincerely, because they felt something. I encourage everyone to read the book that I have been talking about on this subject. Also, there's some videos that I don't know if anyone knows about the subject of the God helmet. But the God helmet is actually covered very well, and kind of the history of the God helmet is covered very well from the YouTube channel Breakfast, or Religion for Breakfast, I think is the name of it. I'll see if I can find the link, and I'll put it on the screen and in the description. But they have a video on the God helmet that explains like the story of the God helmet and how it come about. And how it worked, and how it wound up being more of a placebo effect than it was anything that people felt as if there was some magnetic frequencies they thought that magnetic frequencies were affecting different parts of the brain. And as they changed the frequencies, people were saying, oh yeah, I feel something. I feel a presence, or I feel a thing. And it turns out in a controlled experiment that those magnetic waves, that they weren't strong enough, that they weren't even able to reach or access areas of the brain. So then we had a placebo effect, one that was done that didn't have any didn't have anything. It was just a shell casing of placebo, where they had wires go into nothing that machines weren't on. And they repeated the same experiment. And one of the situations, they'd done it because they wanted to see the effect of chemicals. They'd done it at a festival where there were lots of drinking, and people, they were tested what their blood alcohol level was, and they were asked to take part in this and their sensations. And we did not even get an association with the alcohol to say that people said they felt God more. The only reliable relator that they had in the entire test is how people answered about their spirituality in advance. If they answered in advance that they believed in God, or that they believed in something, some spirit, then the chances were dramatically higher that they were going to feel God when they got the helmet on. So the only thing that was driving the testimony of the sensation is that they in advance had a belief that the thing was real. So if they didn't have an advance that the thing is real, that there is some spiritual or supernatural thing, the chance of them saying, oh, I feel it, I feel God, was astronomically low. It's just astronomically low. And a little to no one said that they think they feel something. But those who in advance already believed in the thing, they were feeling it. So I think that's that alone should tell the story. It didn't seem to even be alcohol or the amount of alcohol that was affecting it. I know similar studies, and Kafif has brought this subject up. Similar studies have showed a correlation to other introduction of chemicals, specifically mushrooms or other exotic drugs introduction, that people have testified to having more ecstatic experiences on these, that are having more chemical interaction going on inside of the brain. And then they're having more ecstatic experiences. Hey, Geo Sam, how's it going, man? But at any point, that's about where we're at on the 44 minutes. I don't think that I have enough rambling left on for me to not do the Q&A or whatnot. Let's see if I have a few more topics that I might have pinned that I did want to speak on the subject before we either open up for a Q&A or we get some panelists in here on the subject. I touched on it just very briefly on Acts chapter 2, verse 13 and 15. I encourage everyone to look at this because others, apparently, by the description of this, the outside people were saying that the people were drunk. But the writer of Acts defends that was not the case, that they were drunk in the spirit. And we see this repeated in themes of people feeling Odin, or in those that are associated with wine gods, which there are books on the whole subject that just discuss the drunken gods of old culture, that there's a whole different set of gods that they only express that they feel those gods in either a drunken state or related to alcohol, that when they're drunk, that they feel God, and it's a sense of not caring, I think, which we all know what that sensation is. We've all been drunk before. We've all been in that fuck it, man, just let it ride sensation. If we've ever had a significant amount of alcohol in us. Hey, now, Gio, how's it going, man? But this is where we're at. I do believe I have it pinned on there. Gio, others that might just be coming in, the things that we're talking about is we're talking about those that have said they have felt God in some sense, and what those emotions are, what those sensations felt like. Let's see. I'm trying to get the other one up here. There we go. I think that everyone that had a very fundamentalist position that feels like they felt God, that's directly associated with them being saying that they had a personal relationship because they felt in some sense that they felt something. And however they describe that feeling varies greatly through religions. But almost everyone that has believed themselves to have felt something genuine whenever they deconvert away from this is one of the things that they have to rectify. They have to rectify that they have said for so long and that they have maintained for so long that they felt something. And when you're coming away from it and you're kind of deconverting and you're seeing the holes, whatever your story of deconversion is, everybody's a little different. But when you're starting to question things, one of the things that you always eventually have to question is that feeling. Was it, what did it mean? If that wasn't God, what is it that it meant? We do have Kurt coming in here. I appreciate you, Kurt, for stopping by. I'm gonna go ahead and drop Kurt on in here. How's it going, man?
Going well, thanks. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, man. Thank you for stopping in.
Yeah, it's good to see you. This is an interesting question to me because it does get to some of my main bugaboos about our discourse.
Yep. Did you deconvert, or were you religious at any point?
Yeah, I grew up highly religious.
Fundamentalist or more Catholic or Orthodox?
Seventh-day Adventist.
Seventh-day Adventist. Okay. Is there, and I don't know if you were here for the William James kind of description of the 5 categories of feeling.
I've read James's VRE, so okay. I'm familiar with it.
Gotcha. Do you have, what would you say that they kind of describe their sensation, or is there a pattern? Like the Pentecostals, almost everything is ecstatic. They'll tell you that they feel God in an energetic way, that they even compare it to feeling fire in the bones sometimes, or in their pants, or the hair rising up on the back of their neck. Whereas some of the religions will do more of the, I feel God in the serene or in the cathartic things. Is there a particular pattern in that religion as to how they feel God?
I would say that they are very skeptical of any emotional attachment to the divine if the person having that attachment is not Ellen G. White. If it's Ellen G. White, then oh my God, it's veridical and real and totally like accurate. But if it's not her, then it's all bullshit.
Fair enough. I'm not in the inside of that. I will have to look into this.
She's a woman who had epilepsy and got struck in the head with a rock when she was a kid. So
Okay.
she had like persisting visions and went to heaven and, you know, all the things that prophetic people do. But within the structure of the church, like that's it. They're just like the Catholics. Catholics cut off all like novel interpretations with Montanism, and the Adventists are like, once Ellen's gone,
absolutely,
nobody can update anything.
Yeah, that's the whole Montanist thing, and like Eusebius writing about the Montanists, it's just such an interesting read. If no one's ever read it before, this is a whole deal that Eusebius says that the Montanists are kicking out thousands of works, that they're all heretical, and that the Montanists they have some prophetesses. One of them, which was a very good friend of Paul. Paul writes about him, or supposedly speaks very well of him in Acts and in other letters of Paul. And that is, what is her name? It slips me. What is it, Kurt?
Thecla?
No, not Thecla. It's a lady that is Priscilla.
Oh, Priscilla. Yeah. I see
Yeah. So she gets into the Montanist group, and it does all the ecstatic experiences and all, and she becomes something of a prophetess, and God speaks through her, and she gives messages and whatnot. And we see this later where we see, I think it's Eusebius that writes on the subject and says that they're kicking out all these heresies, and that he doesn't outright say that there's no new works or no new messages given from God, but he comes very close to saying it, and that they can't be speaking on behalf of God, you know. So I think this is in large part why the church clammed up on, well, there's no new revelations. We're not getting new messages or anything, or no new, they clammed up and canonicaled what they had and said, this is it. This is the set. We're not getting anything. But when I say ecstatic, I don't specifically mean something that they believe that they're getting, you know, messages like Dionysus, kind of the Spirit of God come in them and gave messages. I don't mean that. The Pentecostals, modern Pentecostals do this. They speak with tongues, and then you'll have another person that will stand up that they're an interpreter, and they'll interpret it and say, this is, you know, what God said, thus saith the Lord. These are in some very interesting churches to get into, but they're very similar to the Montanists. But I think for the most part, only the UPC and some of the deep kind of backwoods, or the UPCI is what they're now referred to. Only them really do these kind of things, but all of them will say that they felt God in a very dramatic and a sensory way, that they could feel the tingle, so to speak. Yeah. But not all the religions obviously have that. They have different ways that they define it.
Yeah, I find the experiences people have are highly variant, but their neurological substrate's probably quite similar, right? So you have people who have very active temporal lobes, and when the temporal lobe is really active, people get the sensation of a presence around them, or like unity of the world, or things like that. You know exactly what kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yep. Well,
and that's a real thing that we can induce with magnets or with drugs, but that doesn't mean that it's a real thing that the people are genuinely experiencing any more than sleep paralysis would be, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever read Philip K. Dick's Valis trilogy?
I have not.
Oh, it's great, but it's a tough read. It's not like his like speculative fiction. It's much more like personal and memoirish. But in it, he experiences an event that I think is probably a temporal lobe event, where an interdimensional being comes to him and like explains the universe. And I think he like, it's supposedly fiction, but it sounds like he's just telling people what really happened to him, because his name is Philip Dick, and the character's name is Horse Lover Fat.
Interesting.
And you know, Dick means fat in German. So
okay, I did not know that.
You know what Philip means, so
what's that?
Lover of horses.
So the temporal lobe thing, Kurt, I think that's interesting because I think we knew this as far back as the first experiment with the helmet,
Yeah,
the
the
God
magnet
helmet,
helmet.
that they
Yeah.
were trying to target specifically the temporal lobe is how this reads, that they're trying to send these, magnetic waves into the temporal lobe to see if they, and that's some of the questions. Do they feel as if that they're sensing someone, that there's any presence, to let us know if there's a presence? And I don't know what it all, I think this was very critically reviewed whenever it was looking back. And I don't know if you were in here when we were talking about I was talking about the 2017, where they kind of come back and they did the thing just as a placebo, when they realized that the magnetic waves there was no effect that was being had on the brain. So they just did it as a placebo to see how it worked. But I think that was the main thing they were trying to target, to see if they could get these sensories.
Yeah, you don't need to use
Experiences.
magnet or drugs to get it anyway. There's a bunch of videos of Darren Brown convincing people that there's a God who are like firm atheists just through like neuro-linguistic triggering and like idea sequence such that they're like going to experience something that they feel as like supernatural or unpredictable. And that I think it's not unreasonable to imagine that people would routinely want explanatory closure and confabulate an explanation that made their cognitive dissonance go away, regardless of its truth propositions, right? It could be not, we literally don't have to wonder if people pick comforting, truth apt explanations for things that are not well explained, because we literally live our lives.
Yeah. There was 5. If you come in, and I'll just read back the kind of 5 sets, and this is not from his wording, but this is the kind of the 5 sets, and the best that I can tell of how he's kind of couches the different experiences. Mystical experiences, these are often seen as transcendent, where individuals feel a sense of unity with the divine or the universe. And that was one that you had just mentioned, that kind of experience was one. And this unity with everyone, this unity with everything, or a part of the universe, is it's a recurring theme, specifically in those that take psychedelic drugs and whatnot. This sensation, very specifically, even more so than the rest, is regularly cited.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can induce it without drugs. You can also induce it by fasting or by extended periods without sleep. All of those things are well-known mechanisms.
Absolutely. I could. There's a part of me that is embarrassed to talk, because I did come from a very fundamentalist background, and I do remember having these 7-day fasts and whatnot. And at the time, I was a little thin, so doing some of these bigger fasts, just I would start having blackouts. So if you start going for a 10-day fast or whatnot, and some of the people in the church would have a fast, but they would have something like a V8 or whatnot.
Yeah, these practices are quite dangerous, by the way.
Yes, they are dangerous, and I don't recommend any of them, but they're a biblically
one episode of fainting
kind of
and striking your head on your staircase can end all of your problems with fasting.
Absolutely. But this is still regularly done inside of Pentecostal movements and inside of charismatic movements. It's still, quite a regular thing. But I'll say this, that I have these personal kind of memories of sensations and whatnot that happen inside of these things, that now to talk about them, there's even a sense of embarrassment. But at the time was, this feeling, the richness of the feeling of the sensation. And I was talking earlier about rebound effect, like that you have a massive depravity of a thing, and then it comes back. So we have this with guilt. Someone feels extraordinarily guilty about something, and then they have to have that guilt before they can feel cathartic. So before they can feel a sense of cleanse, and Jesus has lifted everything off of me. This is another one of the big sensation categories, is a sense of conversion. That's something that you have been fundamentally changed. The way that you see things have been changed. And not all of that is couched inside of cathartic experiences, but many people will define this as, and again, the very word cathartic comes from this purity or cleansing, that they'll feel that they've been cleaned, and everything they've done wrong got washed away, that it's all created new. But this is another one of the big hallmark check experiences that people will associate.
Yeah, no
with
doubt.
God.
James distinguishes between the once born and the twice born, but I would say I distinguish between the once born and the multiply born. Most people who go
Right.
through that kind of a conversion love it so much they just want to do it again and again.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how the Catholics, cash this out with the going before the priest and they getting their sins forgiven. You'll go before the Father and do this, and then your sins are forgiven. Is this something, you're kneeling and then you do what it is that you're supposed to do? You do your 5 Hail Marys or whatever. And then this is what has been given this is what you're told, and then you'll to be forgiven. So do they cash this out as once they do the Hail Marys or whatever they're told to do for the forgiveness, as soon as that's done, the kind of smaller cathartic experiences of, okay, I'm forgiven now. What I've done has been washed away,
Do you remember the end of Poltergeist?
I haven't watched Poltergeist in years.
The little woman whose job it is to exercise the house, she takes.
Oh yes, this house is clean.
This house is clean. And I always feel like that's how people feel after they walk out of confession and finish their penance, right?
Absolutely.
Of course,
absolutely.
It's just like Poltergeist. They're back. It's never gonna be permanent. But
such a great reference. Yeah, I think that's what's happens. But I think for some people that's not satisfying enough that they do, and you get this even in fear seekers or whatnot. That once you've jumped out of an airplane and felt this kind of adrenaline thing, that that you have this thirst for it, and small things with heavy like adrenaline junkies that can never be satisfied to that degree. That's why they keep one-upping it until they wind up dying from it,
Yeah. The mechanism is that dopamine requires a prediction mismatch to fire adequately, right? So to get that kind of a circumstance,
shock and awe,
first
surprise.
time is always going to be bigger and experienced as bigger than the iterations. So what people will typically do is run from first time to first time
absolutely
with greater and greater levels of risk taking if they're that kind of person. Now, I do think that aging blunts that circuit dramatically, so that by the time you get to your 30s, it's like you're no longer. If you're again, every person is different. I don't want to, but on average, and this is what we see in criminal behavior, right? There's a big drop off between age 30 and age 40, where such that like novel crimes committed by a person for the first time, that especially are of like a violent or a rule breaking nature, almost never happen after age 40.
Well, it's the song, isn't it? The thrill is gone.
Yeah,
the thrill is gone. you can't get that mismatch anymore. You can't get that. Wow, this is new. This feels completely new, and the shock and awe moment. It's harder and harder to get as you get older. It seems. Hey James, how's it going, man? Thank you for stopping by. But I know we only have 4 people on here, but traditionally I do a Q&A section on here to see if we can. So when you had a convert, did you feel anything, Kurt? Did you feel as if, or say that you felt the presence of God, and how was that cashed out inside of that church?
So in my church, there are like altar calls and like calls to repent and get yourself to be rid of sin. But they're not considered like the nexus of salvation. It's much more standard, like Arminian Christian justification by faith, doctrinally, but with much more emphasis on like the idea that I think is really important in Paul, which is that, you're not saved by your works, but your works better match your stated salvation status, or you're going to destroy the church, right? The ecclesia, in my opinion, in Paul is like the locus of salvation, not the individual. And so the church is saved by acting as if it has faith. And I think that is kind of the Adventist understanding. So there's a lot more emphasis on like right thinking, right practice, and much less on personal statements of faith.
You would say there is, or would you say that there is still this something of perhaps a milder version of a cathartic experience, though?
For sure. And again, it depends on the person, right? Some people will find communion really, really meaningful. Some people will find the moment of their baptism very meaningful. But I don't think that the Adventist Church is very different from Mormonism, where in Mormonism you have to have like an emotional testimony of burning in your bosom about the truth of Joseph Smith, and I don't see a corresponding event.
Yeah, you'll have a lot of that in different Protestant groups that'll have that. Like one of the big, I keep mentioning that they're the just the textbook example constantly. It's why I keep going back to them. It's like Pentecostals will have your evidence is this ecstatic experience and speaking with other tongues, right? So theirs is like, yep, check, check, you got the Holy Ghost, right? So theirs is very specific. But I think a lot of them have this thing that is unique to their religion, whether it's cathartic or whether it's serene or whatever the different type of sensation is. And I don't think there's one shoe size fits all. If you go out on the street and you talk to 10 different people about how, if they felt God, and if they say they felt God, if you ask them to describe the sensation of it, I think you're going to get basically 10 different descriptions, but they do tend to couch inside of the 5 primary categories that seems to be illuminated by James. But I think you're going to get very different descriptions ultimately.
Yeah, this is a bit of a rabbit trail, but my take on the Pentecost story in Acts that you were mentioning earlier is it's just a typology. It's a reverse Tower of Babel.
Yeah. We see it in, it is the reverse Tower of Babel in the book of Acts. That's how that they unify them into the group, is that you're able to speak with other tongues, that you can reach out to these different to different cultures and countries, to go throughout the world and spread the gospels. And the idea that this speaking in tongues, that it could be a message, to other religions. It's very much the reverse of the tower.
Yeah, and in the Tower of Babel, the god is afraid that the people will come up and reach him, and then he confuses their tongues. And in Pentecost, the god is literally reaching down with flames of like tongues of fire onto their heads to allow them to reverse the confusion of tongues that happened in the Tower of Babel. And I think that it's like a direct literary allusion to Philo's book on the confusion of tongues.
Yeah, just at an intuitive sense, it seems like there's this ideal of the shut up heaven that is not the you're not welcome into, even from from Genesis, where we get these components where to take away the tree lest they be like us, and we get this kind of there's this group and there's the humans, and they're very different, and then we get a softening inside of the New Testament of a more of the doors of heaven are open, the thing that is salvation that will allow you this is being done. So these are constant little narrative markers that say that all the way, and the Tower of Babel being that you can't reach the divine, you can't get to the divine, and here's the curse for even trying, is opposed to, yes, now the door is open, this is the way you can reach the divine. So there's this sense of the gate is closed and now the gate is open, slowly but surely getting built into the narrative. But some of that might be just reading a little too far into it. That having been said, any Q&A, I'm going to put the Q&A time up on there. I don't think we're going to run this video very long. How do you think, though, that people rectify this whenever they come away from the religion, Kurt? I mean, is this the biggest hurdle you think that when you're talking to, and I know you've talked to tons of apologetics and maybe even those that have converted, I feel like the more fundamental the religions are, and the less like the Seventh-day Adventists, where they do think there has to be this personal, that this emotion is directly related to a personal relationship, that when they deconvert, this is one of those hurdles that they have to get over, is addressing the sensation, addressing what they once said, this feeling was 100% God. And now as they're deconverting, they have to address it. Was this real? And they eventually have to say, this was me.
Yeah. In one of his books, Dan Barker has a story about when he was a pastor. He got a message from God to drive down this dirt road. And so he drove down the dirt road and kept going and eventually got to a dead end where there was literally nothing there. He's like, had to like try to make that work. And what he ended up after his deconversion realizing was, no, that was always just him
just driving down roads,
just driving down a road, making a mistake. And at one level, right, that's liberating, because it's much more confusing to think God wanted me on this dead end road. Sent me this message to do it.
That is fantastic.
I think this kind of event, like have you ever read Gazzaniga's work on split brain patients?
No, I've heard it talked about in a few different things, and I think even Alex O'Connor brought it up in a.
So when your brain is split and your one side that doesn't do verbal work is presented with something, and the hand on that side is asked to pick something, it'll pick it no problem. It understands the content, but then you'll be asked to explain why you did that, and the other side of your brain is the side that actually comes up with the explanation. And so the other side of the brain will just make shit up because it's not going to correspond with what was presented to the side that made the choice. And what I think is going on with a lot of religious explanations is that I made a choice based on an affinity fixation for this charismatic person or group, and I've bought into this bundle of beliefs that this group identifies with. The cognitive dissonance of disagreeing with one of their core beliefs is so high that when I'm asked about the beliefs, I put out whatever will tamp down the cognitive dissonance adequately in the moment, and then I'll just stick with it as long as I have that affinity fixation.
Right. For people that might be seeing this later, I do want to specify split brain patients. My understanding is the vast majority of these come from older procedures where they were trying to.
Yeah, we hardly ever do that procedure anymore.
Yeah, it's just not really done anymore. But this is why it was originally done, was for seizures. So now we have a bunch of people who have had the procedure done, and so when we have some people who want to do some tests on some very strange split brain effects, they'll go to them. So there is this networking of neurons that goes across in the top section of the brain is the ones that I understand that is cut in the split brain procedure.
The corpus callosum.
Right. So we have an overactivity of neurological firing, and we wind up getting seizures. And I understand that this is fairly effective, or that it was fairly effective whenever it was being. It was what? No.
Yeah, it's highly effective for the seizures. It just causes like split brain.
Causes some other problems. Right. And just for the rest of that scenario, my understanding is that you could possibly even, and I don't know if this has been done, but even lie detectors, they would pass on as to the reason why they done the thing. They genuinely think that's why they done it.
Well, there's a non split brain example of this that happens literally every day in every country. When an athlete, a trained athlete, has a reflex-like coordinated response, that never goes up to the consciousness, or they suck. They're terrible at it if it's involving their consciousness.
Right.
So they're doing at best spinal cord level transmission. Oftentimes it's probably local ganglia that are involved to respond to something in 50 to 200 milliseconds that it takes for these really fast moving projectiles to be dealt with. But then in the post-game interview section, the sports reporter will ask, well, what was going through your mind when this thing happened?
Right.
The correct answer is literally nothing was going through my mind. It was a completely reflexive action based on tens of thousands of hours of practicing those exact scenarios over and over again.
You just won't say muscle memory.
Answer. Nobody who's a hockey goalie or a baseball hitter is going to give that answer. So they say, well, I knew he liked to do this or that, so I just kind of sidled over to this side or whatever, and that's their answer. And that's a confabulated answer under any understanding. But isn't everybody fine with that? I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. I'm not going to be like, you're lying. There's no way that could. We all, I'm sure, do that sort of thing to explain our decisions. Well, why did you have hot chocolate today instead of coffee? Well, I was just thinking about Christmas, and I thought, well, no, probably you just saw it between the hot chocolate and coffee and picked and didn't even think about it.
Right. And some of these motivators are these things that are that just cause us to make actions. I very recently have this conversation over on one of Azo's channels where he's trying to get to the foundation of morality, and we run into that which moves or motivates. And I finally asked the question, what's your favorite color? And he says blue. Well, why? And we can keep doing this why thing, but there's a foundation at which he doesn't have an answer anymore. You can't have an answer anymore. That there is just this, there's this value in which that you prefer that. That's just all the answer is. So you could say, I like blue because X, because, I had this thing whenever I was a child. And even this, when you're saying why you like the color blue, it may be absolute bullshit. There may be this dissonance going
Absolutely.
on here.
It's just a gustatory affinity at base that's unexplained or over-explained, right?
Over-explained. Yep, absolutely. That having been said, we're going to turn on the Q&A section if anybody has any questions about this, or if we do have anybody that has, and I would really love a testimony of how anyone wind up dealing with the problem of believing that they had genuine sensations or feelings with God. That having said, if you got any questions that you want to do a Q&A, just put a question mark on them and we'll bring them to the channel. I think we already got this. James, you are more than welcome to drop in here also, man. This is not a one-on-one interview. This is just an open time. Is it possible to end up with two personalities and one of them is trapped in the side of the... Yeah, this very question has been talked about on stage more than a few times. This is one that Alex O'Connor is constantly... It seems like he's obsessed with the subject. He's brought it up many times. Is he not, Kurt? That you could have a...
Watch him a lot.
Well, I've seen him even on other shows. Where he was with an open panel of different people on the stage. He'll wind up bringing this subject up specifically, as to whether you can have a whole nother person kind of locked in a personality that you don't have access to inside of the brain.
Yeah, neurologically, in split brain patients, this is not the case because the side of the brain controls half the body. It's the contralateral half, but they do have like phenomenal control. And I believe that they can write even if they're not the language centers. So let's say the right brain that controls the left hand can actually write with the left hand, like what it's thinking, even if or point to things or point to an answer, even though it's not the language center. So I do think that there's no like circumstance in split brain patients like that. Now there is dissociative disorder. Dissociative disorder is complicated. Like I think it's difficult to say with certainty that dissociative disorders are actually separate and like entirely individual personalities that are living in the same brain as someone else. That's great for screenwriters. Screenwriters love dissociative disorder, but my guess is that there's an underlying unified phenomenology for those individuals. I just don't have any way to establish that fully. But I think it's much more likely that their modes of being like an actor would have.
Yeah. There's just too many things that you can't know about consciousness, just because of the nature of it being consciousness, that we can't really know just how it's working.
Arguably, an actor who does a character is like a substantially different person while they're in character.
Absolutely. I've heard people that are method actors talk about this, and that they talk about that they have to feel that character. You just truly get into it as if you're there. Right. In a lot of ways it is. So is it fake when people cry? I mean, in what sense do you mean fake? Are they eliciting the emotional experience? They know that there's a separation from the emotional experience, that to some degree that it's not, it's not real, but are they in some sense inducing the emotion? Then that makes the waterworks happen. And I think when you talk to method actors or you hear them in interviews, they'll say they feel it.
Oh yeah, and same for anger, right? So a good method actor who's angry is genuinely angry when they're being filmed. Their heart rate's up, their face is flushed, their fists are clenching, like they are genuinely feeling the entire suite of
absolutely.
associated with the anger.
Yeah.
It's just the source of their anger is the acting, and
Yeah,
not.
it's weird you can turn it on like that. It's weird that you could just turn it on like that, and that it's almost like that kind of muscle memory thing of anger. When you see this, like people's pounding the desk and whatnot, and none of this was even in the script. This is just that you're getting into the sensation and the emotion of it. And we've seen this with Leonardo DiCaprio, was a famous one where he wound up slapping his hand down and he hit the glass and cut it bad and all, and he kept on doing the scene and all. But he was just in the passion of it, in the narrative of it. So can we say that was fake in the sense that the emotions were fake? No, I think he was genuinely feel it. Obviously, we have enough that we know that when the cut's done, we're done with it. We don't have any investment in it or whatnot. But I think that you're genuinely feeling the emotion. GeoSam here says people seem to only feel the gods that they believe in. I think people feel emotions, and then whatever god that they believe is true, then they just stitch that together.
I think there are edge cases where people develop an affinity fixation for a novel belief system.
Okay.
And then they have that affinity first, and then they'll have an experience of that new God concept that will then convince them that their old God concept was incorrect.
So you're talking about any conversions specifically then?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see conversion happening as soon as you have the affinity fixation, right? As soon as somebody decides, oh, this person is better in some like aesthetic way, and then their reason will then become the slave of that passion, of that affinity, and justify why the new God is the better God. And most conversion narratives have that sort of structure. But then, yes, they'll have an epiphany of the new God quite commonly.
This is they have these sensations of anticipation that go on a lot in this subject too. Like, and I bring Dionysus up a lot because just reading any of the stuff from Dionysus, or reading the play of Euripid, however you say his damn name, but reading this, it seems like what we get is when they're inside of the ritual, they're doing the ritual, and then they.
Oh no, you're talking about Bacchic. Sorry.
Well, Bacchic is just another name for Dionysus, but
right. But the Bacchic. But
you're right; it's not in the play. You're right. You're totally right. It's not in the play. But anyway, so in this, they're talking about during the ritual that they're feeling Dionysus or Bacchic coming into them, and they're feeling their spirit. But the sensation didn't happen until they start the ritual and they start the motions and the mechanics of it, and then. I think then they get to that point where, they feel the spirit of God. But that could have been any God. I truly think that, like, you could have that kind of expectation and that kind of like emotional connection to that idea, and then you start doing the ritual of it, and then, now I'm feeling it. Now I'm feeling that God. But it's not I don't think it's a specific God the majority of the time.
Yeah, so I actually have a paragraph on this where I say, ancient hunter-gatherer communities had no margin for error. Their survival depended on accurate transmission of knowledge about ecological facts like water, plants, animal behavior, navigating the landscape. They needed powerful pressures to allow them to remember these facts. So they developed rhythmic chants, song lines, and structured recitations that also were corresponding with a deep emotional resonance that we now see as awe and reverence. And during these periods of time, these mechanisms were literally critical to survival and made the difference between life and death. So religious practices just harness the brain's affinity for these rhythmic, repetitive structures and linguistic features, such that the neurological circuits that are activated by the awe and the reverence do the community building of the shared ritual, but without the survival benefit to modern people.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. And I think we don't really, the rhythmatic side of a lot of the older religious cultures and what they did in rhythmatic sense, that's not really expressed very well in a lot of the literature. But we see this in even a lot of modern religions, whether we're talking about kind of Chinese cultures that have their folklore religions in the Chinese culture, or even the Muslims, even presently, that they kind of sing rhythmatically.
Think about the Hajj.
Yeah, the
circling
Hajj
around the Kaaba.
Oh, right. Absolutely. This is one of the things that I was talking about earlier of one of the 5 sets that we kind of put the emotional sensation is the sense of unity is when they're circling around it and they're dancing and they're doing this. They're doing a rhythmic chant and going around in a circle at the same time while they're doing it. So that the sensation of the kind of the unity of the group, it's so tremendous. But this is all happening rhythmically.
Yeah. They like circle and circle and circle and circle for several hours. Chanting and reciting sections of the Quran, and that it has a major effect. Look at what it did to Malcolm X.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Going on a Hajj caused Malcolm X to like abandon the Nation of Islam and convert to just regular Sunni Islam because he had such a powerful mystical experience.
Really?
Yeah.
Not read on that subject as much. I'm going to take a few more questions from here.
If you haven't read the autobiography of Malcolm X, I do strongly recommend it. It was written by Alex Haley. He's the guy who wrote Roots.
I'm a little standoffish on Malcolm X. I didn't like his approach as much as I did like Martin Luther. You have very different approaches in
that. Between his Nation of Islam days and his post Nation of Islam days.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. Let's see. Well, we got another one here. Another question on here. I don't know if some of these are just jabs or some of them are genuine questions. Why would I feel Jesus? I don't think that generally goes on. We hear a lot of testimony after someone has converted, or we hear
Again, if somebody was a Christian and they wanted to convert to Hinduism, then they would definitely say they felt Vishnu, or they would say they were visited by Jesus, who told them he was an avatar of Vishnu. No, that's like totally legit. That is the Hindu understanding of Jesus.
I was just going to say, actually, I watched a video about 2 days ago where a lady was talking about the kind of Hindu things, and she completely, the way that she describes it, she could totally see that Jesus is just she has a word for it, but it's just like an incarnation of sorts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's definitely something that Hindus could regularly see that being the case.
Yeah, Hinduism can absorb really just about any set of religious concepts.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't require any one specific understanding. And again, I believe you could be like someone who identifies as a Hindu and like reject Vedantic monism and say that, no, I'm a Hindu, but I don't believe in like Vedanta, because there's so much variability and ability within that belief structure to just say, it's just like Christianity, right? We have people who now are like literally Marcionites who are claiming to be Orthodox Christians.
Yeah, I think it's just if you already, similar to doing the canon, like you have a group that can say, well, this book is canon, this isn't, we can selectively, you've got an even better scenario where you can say that this was an incarnation of, and this one wasn't. So things that fit with your ideology, you have what's even better than accepting this canon or that not canon. You have this whole personage can be, we believe, is a manifestation of those things which that aligns with us. What are your thoughts on Paul's dualism? I'm not exactly sure what we're talking about. When I hear dualism, obviously I always think about mind body, but I'm not sure about an association with Paul's dualism.
I am not convinced Paul was a dualism in the modern understanding. I don't think Paul was a dualist in the modern understanding of dualism. In the first and second century of Christianity, the idea that spirit was physical, I think, was the norm, right? So in Plato's like tripartite soul, the spirit is like a rarefied substance, but it's a substance. It's got physicality to it. It's just really pure and really uncorrupted. And I do think that Paul's soteriology uses those Platonic soul concepts, right? So the vegetative soul is the hylic man. The second soul in Plato, I think, is the rational soul, and that rational soul would be the psychic man, and then the spirit, I think, in both like they're some kind of like moral or ethical soul, and that's the pneumatic man. So, but on that ontology, they were all just various types of substance that are found in people. They were not immaterial. We don't really see the concept of immateriality until the 3rd or 4th century.
Yeah, I've heard the argument go on before whether Paul was something of an apocatastasis, that he invested in the ideal of like universal reconciliation, based on
Well, I'm convinced that he did believe that all
that he
souls
did believe that.
to
Yeah.
salvation.
Yeah, I've recently had this conversation come up in another channel called Gangster something, and I mentioned it, and I could not come up with the verse right off the top of my head where he was talking about the gentleman that to give their flesh over to the devil or something like this, so that
That's 1 Corinthians 5.
Oh, there we go. I think that is the one that was cited by one of the early church fathers that kind of backed the ideal of apocatastasis is from Paul, from this verse, if I'm not mistaken, which I think was Origin. I think it was Origin that mentioned it. So I definitely think that Paul did believe in universal reconciliation of. I don't know enough about his ideal if he thought of a third character like the soul or spirit. I think for the most part, we just use these terminologies in modern times. But I just think spirit was kind of the only that thing that is alive or the animal.
Yeah. And Paul definitely thinks that like the spirit is a body. He says the kind of body that will be raised is different from the kind of body that was planted. He doesn't say no body at all. And when he goes to the third heaven, I don't think he's saying in the body or out of the body as in the body or immaterial. He's saying in the like the physical hylic body or in the spiritual body.
Yeah.
And I definitely think he's like the 3-part soul, whether he's getting it from Plato or somebody else, as like the way of salvation, right? Somebody who's a babe in Christ is probably just between the like fleshly soul and the psychic soul. And that's why he's so worried about them getting the wrong ideas or being led astray by more advanced believers.
I think your first question, Geo-Sam, was very similar to your second, and I think the second question is the crux of the question. So that's why I put it up on the board. But Geo-Sam's asking, how would one know the feeling was from their God? And then how do you identify which God is causing the feeling? This is the crux of the entire problem. I mean, I think whatever God you believe in, you already have that, that's set. And then you feel the sensation. And I think me and Kurt has a little bit of a disagreement on this and a little bit of agreement on this. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Whatever framework you're using to explain your world and how things work, why it rains, why it does whatever it does, you're applying the sensations and the feelings, and sometimes believing in those gods or trying to push more relationship or conversation is eliciting more of these sensations, but there's just no way to distinguish one from the other. All of these gods have caused emotional sensations, so to speak.
There's 2 levels here, right? So there's the level of the person experiencing the feelings, like how do they make that distinguishing? And for me, like religious traditions do as good of a job as they can to make sure that no doctrinal novelties ever come from these feelings, right? If you get a conviction that your church's doctrine is wrong, you have 2 possibilities, right? You're going to not pay attention or say that's coming from the devil, or you're going to start your own church. And both are reasonably common. Like both are things that happen. But much more importantly to me is the response of other people who you describe the feeling of the God to. And like if you were Pentecostal, I know in Adventism, like people would get like feelings about what God was telling them to do all the time when I was a believer and I believed exactly the way that they did. And I thought God was the same kind of God they did. And I regarded universally, like 100%, all of them as bullshit. I thought they were all wrong every time. Like I never once had a person who was a believer in my religion come to me and say, God's compelling me to do this or that. And I thought, oh, sure he is. I never once endorsed the idea that it was accurate in my own mind. Now, I'm willing to bet that in Pentecostalism, it's at least 95% of people think other people's, not theirs, but other people's like messages from God are bullshit.
No, it's not that high, but it is high. I want to just say that it is. It's. I don't know what the percentage is.
If
I
it's
wouldn't say it's that
80%,
high.
or even if it's a majority, it undercuts the like structure of the belief system.
So I have a personal comment on this subject. Let me just tell you, and I wrote this in a book that I haven't finished writing. The book that I released, I'm doing a different book that I'm like halfway through, and I've kind of paused it. But I wrote talking about this subject specifically because whenever I was in the Pentecostal church and I met my wife there, I was very young whenever I met my wife. I was probably 16 years of age, and we were obviously not married yet, but she was right at 14 years of age. And an older man came to her father, and he was about 55, 57 years old. And he said that God spoke to him and said that he was to marry his daughter, which became my wife. Right. And
that was uniformly and immediately regarded as bullshit by everyone.
Yes, it was. But did he truly believe that happened? I have no doubt. He did something of a stalking thing of my wife. And again, I think we had just started kind of a little bit of like kind of dating at the time. I don't remember, nothing serious. It was just flirtatious moments. And I kind of got wind of this man that I kind of respected to some degree, that just told her father that God spoke to him and said that he was, to marry his daughter. So very interesting. And I don't know how everybody deals with these different things that people, when they say that God spoke to them, but this is the danger of that. And this is why I think most of the Catholic and the Orthodox religion shut all that off. They shut all that messaging from God. And it's scary because when you get in Pentecostal churches and you get people that are speaking in tongues, and then you get the moment where they speak out loud. You'll get this sometimes. They'll speak out loud in tongues because they feel like God's speaking through them and they have a message. And then it'll get real quiet after that. And you'll have somebody that'll stand up and interpret. And it's so weird because you're giving this space and this silence, but you don't know what the hell they're going to say, right? This is just a person from the crowd. That is, giving the message that God gave. And it's a scary thing because it can be the Lord wants us to, stretch out a chain of people across the highway out here and stop people. God. And, things like this. This has happened. This has definitely happened. And then the church is put under the stress of, oh God, do we go along with this? That this was God's message,
And let me just be clear. It's going to be the affinity and charisma associated with that person that determines whether this gets happened.
Exactly.
Not any action by God.
Absolutely. How convincing was this individual, and how, dug in as far as his association, and how
much money are they going to lose if we don't do this?
Right. So that's a very interesting.
If Elon Musk has one of those moments, then everybody's going to just jump to.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. If Elon had, because just people are so dug into him, invested as a character. If God works out everything in conformity with purpose or his will, in what way does the claim that one's faith is being tested makes sense? I want to totally understand that question, and maybe he gave it a little better in the next one. But that people's faith is being tested, but that this was all happening in accordance to his will. That it was always his will that these things be tested. This is just a battle with determinism. This is what it is. Is God pre-know how everything's going to go on? It seems like what's going on with that.
I think faith being tested language is more common in like Arminian and Molinist traditions than in Calvinist traditions, or like in Islam, there's a major school of Islam that doesn't believe that anything happens, but that Allah is doing 100% of it. So I don't think that even if you believe that Allah was testing you under that viewpoint, like your response is going to be whatever Allah wills anyway.
I'm going to give you my answer on this one, Dade, and I'll let Murphy give you, or let Kurt give you his. I think it is absolutely pointless to talk to a solipsism, a person that takes the position of solipsism. I think they're inside of a falsifiable ideal that it cannot be escaped. There's no way out. But anyway, Kurt, if you're seeing the question on here, I'll read it for the viewers and whatnot. Is there any value in debating subjects centered on the concept of solipsism? Is there any way to falsify hard solipsism? I say no.
So deductively and like relation of ideas, like certain proof, I don't think you can falsify it. I also find it a complete waste of time to discuss. Like I would say that all of us make an aesthetic, axiomatic judgment that reality is real to have conversations. We also make an aesthetic, axiomatic judgment that people can change their minds if we're having conversations, which to me rules out like Asharite, Muslim occasionalism and Calvinism and all that. Like, I don't know why a Calvinist would ever try to convince anybody of the truth of Calvinism. But such that it is, there is a very strong inductive argument against hard solipsism, I think, which is that if hard solipsism is true, the processing power of my brain is amazing.
Infinite. It's almost
amazing.
infinite.
It's got the ability to process stuff such that I can dig deep into any topic I want, and I will get this ornate, completely profuse explanation of how such and such a thing works that I'm actually on hard solipsism creating in the moment and making it cohere with the entire structure of knowledge in ways that seem accurate to me. And yet it is all confabulated, which is an amazing amount of computer power. But
it is, but there's a pushback to that, and I don't know what it is.
Thoughts that I think are my own, they're shit. They're like error prone and awful and highly fallible, and I get confused, and I think a pencil going into a glass of water is bent. Like, how is it that my brain has this amazing compute strength, but fucks up at like the point of my attention so badly so often? That, to me, is a very strong inductive argument against hard solipsism.
There is a pushback on that, but I'll get to that later. The one that I like more, that is a funnier kind of jab, is when people take the hard solipsism position. I'll do this joke of, oh shit, what happens when you get Alzheimer's? You know, what happens to the rest of us? You know, oh shit, you know,
all of us will disappear.
Right. But no, the pushback on that I think is that the model of energy is dependent on the mind. Like, you've created the model of energy that, like, it takes X amount of energy, that there's this exponential growth to run more and more and more, that's just a concept.
Right, but I'm not talking about an energetic constraint per se. I'm just talking about a just processing limit constraint, right? I'll grant that the whole thing is immaterial, and the hard solipsism problem is that there is really nothing but your consciousness and it's just you. I'll grant all that. I'll grant there's no energetics involved. I still don't think the compute power of my awareness field is in any way commensurate to the compute power of my attentional field.
That's a decent argument. I have not found any ground myself. Have you talked to many hard solipses? I don't know how you say it as an individual. Many people that
I've never met a person who held to hard solipsism.
Well, never. I have
people who argue as if hard solipsism is a problem I have to solve to get to a point where I can have a conversation with them, but they never hold to the position of hard solipsism, which to me is a proof to the concept being like unproductive regardless. If someone's a hard solipsism, why the fuck would they try to convince you about anything?
There's just no reason to argue it whatsoever. Like, if you truly had power, if you can't convince me that, if you believe hard solipsism and you can't convince me that it's true, then this is your failures, not mine. 100%. It's all your failures. So you can't win either which way. So yeah, I think the subject's a waste of time, but I don't think that I think that people pose it more as a problem, and they're like, this can't be solved. Then then you run into people that are like, no, I believe this, because I don't just believe. There's no functionality to believe in that thing.
No, I think it's important if you're going to have like a really hard conversation with somebody who's like a precept or like strong religious believer, that you start the conversation by saying, now you agree that both you and I exist and that there's this world that's separate from both of us, which I feel like that's just the basis of having a conversation. If we're going to have a conversation, we have to both think that we're real and that there's other stuff that we can argue about.
Yeah. Yeah, you get into this conversation, and I think Dade's right. This gets brought in by religious people with like, they're trying to get to like foundationalism. This is a presuppers all day. This is a presuppers thing constantly, that you can't know anything unless you know God is, and that this is just a foundational kind of thing. So you're not wrong, Dade. We run into these people constantly, and they bring up or they touch on the subject of solipsism because for their own narrative's sake. In Christianity, I don't know how many times you've probably run into many people in this type of conversation.
I mean, I've never once had a person come in and go, my belly really hurts, but man, that's like totally me doing that. I'm not even worried about it because I'm a hard solipsist. Not once in my entire career seeing people.
Yeah, this is Sam Harris's big thing, his pushback on like foundational of morality kind of thing. This is his big thing. And I think he uses the example of putting his hand on the fire, that at some point, nothing else matters. It just, in value, in terms of the value, just there's, as the fire gets hotter and hotter, you can have all the discussions about where sets of value and all comes from, it all means nothing as the fire gets hotter on the hand. That at some point, it just, this is all that is real, is that fire.
And earlier stages of development, right? So like in a preschool, Timmy kicks Johnny. The one thing that's never going to happen is a discussion of moral realism.
Right. Absolutely.
The thing you can guarantee won't happen is that one of them will say, well, I don't have a fully developed moral ontology, and I'm not convinced that what you did was objectively wrong.
Yeah. We're in a Q&A period. If anybody has any questions, we are primarily talking about, and we'll drift around a little bit because it is a broad subject, but we're talking about feeling God. And if you have any questions on this subject, or if you have any stories where that you deconverted or you believe in God and you believe that you felt God or you once did, please, by all means, ring us. We'd like you to come in and talk about that and talk about what the sensation was like and how you overcome it. But presently, we're running some Q&A until we get any such person in here. Do you believe that we have free will? This is a little off subject, but I'll tell you now, I think that term free will, it has a lot of definitional things. You can say that we could say free choice in some sense, might be more accurate to say free choice. In the broadest sense, I don't think so. But again, that's me. That's where I'm at on the subject of free will. I don't think that we can say that we have free will in any broad sense. What about you, Kurt?
The free will of the philosophers, where it's not related to my past and my exposures and my family and my reading and my upbringing. Yeah, I don't believe in that free will at all. And I also don't think anybody should ever want to have that kind of free will. That's like not the kind of free will I would want, where my decisions are actually to some degree random. That would make me feel awful. So I don't think the philosopher's version of free will is one that I would accept. And so by the philosopher's definition, where it's completely uncaused, I would agree that we don't have that. But I have the kind of free will I want, which is to be unconstrained in my life and pick things that I have like aesthetic desires for.
Autonomy, personal autonomy to some degree, the things that we don't want to control, that we have naturalistic internal impulses that are getting to determine in large part what it is that they want to do. With those internal impulses, whether they're built somewhat by genetics or whether they're built somewhat by our upbringing and the things that have affected us, that collection of those internal things that is driving our impulses is largely what is getting to make the decisions. You can call that free choice if you like couching it in that term better, but ultimately it's not an external force or entity that is saying you must behave in this way. And it feels, at least at a sensational level, that you have a sense sense of individual autonomy. And when people don't have that sensation of individual autonomy, they feel oppressed. There's a genuine sensation of that I am oppressed, and they push and kick and scream against it. So to the degree that that sensation is not present and those external factors do not feel as if they are bearing in on me, I'm okay with the term free choice, that the external things are not actively and in some conscious sense forcing the choices that are made. But in terms of an absolute free will, I just don't buy it.
And I would make an additional corollary that any Christian who believes in the traditional concept of eternal conscious torment as punishment for lack of belief is actually abandoning any free will theodicy, because we genuinely hold that coerced choices are not free will. If someone holds a gun to your head and then makes you steal, a Hostess fruitcake, and then you have to give it to him, and then he leaves you holding the bag because you're on the camera, and he's had a sniper laser pointer on you the whole time. Most people would argue that that person is not culpable for the theft, and that the culpability goes to the person who was coercing them. So on that view, Christian belief is not chosen freely.
Yeah, it seems that in legal definitions, that whether we use the term free will or whatever we want to represent individual autonomy, that for us to have a functional society, that we have to have a way of saying culpable and not culpable. We have to have a way of saying, and it's weird that I listen to a lot of the same people on the different subjects, but even Sam Harris said, even if there isn't free will, what does that mean to society? Does that mean?
I don't think it has any bearing.
It doesn't have any bearing whatsoever. So that the legal systems still have to act in the way that they act, and to some degree we could even say that they have no free will in the subject. That's become something of a joke.
And again, if a philosopher's free will is correct, juries should never convict anybody for anything because the decision was random anyway.
Yeah. Two things, and I want to get to this question because this is a big part of what the show is, but I do want to point out there is also another little problem that we run into in the conversations with this subject specifically. We'll come back to it. I can't even think of what the hell it was. So let's deal with this. How would you recommend overcoming the self-assurances of these feelings of God when having the conversation of if God exists with a believer? I have been trying to struggle with a model with this myself, in large part, I think, and you'll see this over on Breakfast Tacos where Kurt is and where a lot of people are having discussions. Rarely is the conversation from apologetics brought up. It is generally in a lower, kind of a lower tier of conversation that they relate everything back to the sensation. I think most of the time you're going to stay on like ontology arguments or the nature of the PSR or what preceded. These are going to be the majority of the arguments, but every once in a while you will run into people that try to ground out with, well, I felt this. How do you explain that? How do you explain that I felt this? And when I run into those people, what I have been trying to develop, and again, you have to have a strong knowledge base on the subject, is correlating all of the other different religious literature that says that these different religions felt God. So I generally, and I mentioned Dionysus a bit because it's one of the more ecstatic ones and more that they say use no uncertain terms in terms of they felt the spirit of God come into them. But also some other literatures that talk about. But the problem that you get in pushback, and I don't know if you've ever even ran this kind of line of argument before, Kurt, the problem that you get with pushback is that was the devil. So instead of accepting that people can feel these sensations and attribute these sensations to their God, the scapegoat is, well, there was something that was real that was causing the emotions. That's an evil spirit. It was the devil that was trying to imitate a God, to cause them to be led astray. So what's your experience on the subject, Kurt?
I just argue with the base ontology of it, right? Everybody has feelings all the time. And unless you get something that confirms certainly that the thing that you experienced was from God, the base assumption should be that it was a feeling you had in yourself that may or may not have been veridical, right? That's the other problem, right? the multiplicity of these experiences and the fact that plenty of people are willing to ascribe them to satanic or demonic forces suggests to me that all you're really doing is confirming your priors, right? If you're a Catholic and you get a feeling from God, then it's got to confirm Catholicism or it's from the devil. So I think Orthodoxy has a similar tradition where you can't learn anything new about God from an epiphany. You can only confirm your previously held beliefs, and most groups do stuff like that. Even Mormonism, I think, has that, where if it doesn't match what the prophet says, it's from the devil. So the other issue is that then all these people from all these different groups are having these confirmatory beliefs, and they're felt just as strongly from group to group and religion to religion, but their content is highly variable, and therefore it's just not reliable.
Yeah, the Muslims have a little strange hiccup inside of their doctrine on the subject, because they have this idea that that the Prophet Muhammad cannot be imitated by the devil. I think there's two different verses that talk about it. That Satan cannot take the image of the prophet. Right. So when they get a vision, and I think this is said in the text, so when you receive a vision, know that it is truly the prophet. But the problem is the way that they define it is that is a personal message for them. It's never a collective message. So if they receive a vision, right, it's never doctrine. It can, right. And they kind of the Muslim, they deal with this problem as in that way, because they've already kind of got the problem that people, if they see the Prophet Muhammad inside of a vision, that it can't be Satan. And we kind of already have that established in text. But then what do you do with this if the Prophet Muhammad is giving you, this message? Well, it's just personal. It can only be personal, and it can't be doctorial. So that's how they wind up fixing the little hiccup I think that they have. But that's an interesting question, and I think we've fairly satisfied it. Any more questions or anything? I think we're going to be wrapping this up in a few minutes. If anybody wants to come in here and say, hey, we are doing these live streams also every Saturday. We'll talk about a different subject. I'd like people to reach out to me if they have a specific subject that they have strong knowledge in and they want to talk about that subject, and yourself included, Kurt. You want it coming on here, and it's just not as a main guest. And I appreciate you coming on, and almost you are the main guest of today, even though it wasn't scheduled. But if there is a specific subject that anyone has that they have a fair amount of knowledge on, or that they'd like to talk about that subject and dig a little deeper, please reach out to me. We've done this with Objective Ethics, where he wanted to talk about ethics from an objective viewpoint. And I wanted to regularly start this on Saturdays, that we'll have a topic that we know in advance, and have a guest on that may have some specific or specialized knowledge in the subject. That having been said, if you have something, and I know you're just a treasure trove of knowledge in my experience, Kurt. So if you have a particular thing that you have interest in, I'd love to have you on it. That having been said, I think we're about wrapping up. We have no more Q&A. And I appreciate y'all. Every Saturday, we're going to be running this at 2:00 Central Standard Time. You can stop by and see us. And again, I have all my contact information on the YouTube channel, whether you want to reach out to me on Discord, shoot me something on Facebook, or just shoot me an email. I appreciate it. We do have somebody dropping in here last minute. Antangelo. I was trying to run this for 2 hours, and I think I'm just shy of that. So we're going to bring Antangelo in for just a moment. How's it going, man? I'll tell you in advance that we're not going to be running this show for more than 5 or 6 more minutes, but I did miss you the last time, Antangelo, when you dropped in, but we were not doing a open host. We were waiting until Q&A to take people in, and then you had already left. But how's it been going, man?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
Quite well.
Hi, Antangelo.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, the topic isn't really what I usually talk about, because I'm more reason-oriented guy and not base my beliefs in feelings.
Okay.
Have you ever had an epiphany, Antangelo?
Excuse me?
Have you ever had an epiphany where you felt God was speaking to you?
No.
Have you ever had sensations? I knew when you used that word, I was like, a lot more people are going to back away from that word epiphany specifically, because that implies a message. But do you think that you have had something that accounts for feeling God in any sense, whether that's a cathartic sensation or some sensation that you attribute to that as feeling God?
Well, I had one experience a long time ago, about 20 years ago, and I went to a church which was Pentecostal, and then many people they fell into a kind of state of trance or
Mm-hmm.
taken by the Holy Spirit. And I was surprised that I actually also went into that state. But that was a unique experience. I've never had that before and afterwards.
Okay, so that's a kind of a static experience is what I think we generally define that particular one as a static. And it is generally, I won't say specifically adrenaline based, but it feels as if adrenaline, and it can feel like the hair standing up kind of. Is it an energy field sensation, would you say?
No, it was rather than going into an ecstatic state, it was kind of more getting into a relaxed state.
Oh, okay. Okay. So more of a serene, not a static is what it sounds like.
Yes,
More of a
yes.
serene state. Okay. Peace and calm and one with the universe kind of sensations, or no?
I'm sorry?
Is a sense of unity inside of the experience, or was it I don't want to layer emotional things onto it that unnecessarily. But we've been talking about this subject for a minute and kind of the different categories that people define the sensations, and we've been associating this with different religions throughout history, even pre-Christian, that kind of might have alluded to such sensations. And how do you? I know you already said that you don't generally deal with the topic so much inside of the sensations or the feelings, but do you think that when other religions in the past, when we see inside of their literature, like that they felt the spirit or presence of God, do you wrap that up to them being influenced by the devil, or do you say that maybe that's just an internal thing that they're activating the sensations themselves and then associating it with the God?
Well, I make no judgment on that because I have not studied the topic. So,
Fair enough. That having been said, Antangelo, I'd love you to have you by again. We do the show though every Saturday at 2:00, and we generally run it for an hour and 30 minutes the first time, but I've been regularly running it for 2 hours after that, and I am going to have some things to get to. I appreciate everyone coming out and joining us. I invite everyone back to next Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. That having been said,